I'm Caleb, 32, and I swear my family has made a sport out of reminding me where I stand in the pecking order. You know how some families joke about the golden child and the forgotten child? Mine isn't a joke. It's practically a tradition at this point. My brother Ethan is the star quarterback of their lives, and well, I'm the guy they call when they need their Wi-Fi fixed. Last Christmas should have been my first clue that things were only getting worse. My wife and I had spent weeks saving up to get decent gifts for everyone, even though we're not exactly swimming in cash. She crocheted matching scarves for my mom and dad. I found this rare vinyl record my dad had been hunting for since the 80s, and we got my brother's kids a Lego set they'd been begging for all year. The living room smelled like cinnamon and pine when we walked in, arms loaded with bags, feeling proud that we'd made it work on our budget. But when it came time to exchange gifts, my mom cleared her throat and said, "Caleb, honey, I'm so sorry. We couldn't afford gifts for your kids this year." She said it so softly, like she was announcing a tragedy. I just nodded, told my kids to sit tight, and pretended it didn't sting. I figured, okay, times are tough, maybe they really can't. Then I watched Ethan's kids tear through wrapping paper like a Christmas morning commercial. iPads, designer sneakers, personalized leather jackets with their initials stitched on the back. The whole living room was a mountain of boxes, and Ethan was sitting in the middle like Santa Claus, grinning and taking credit for half of them even though I knew Mom and Dad had pitched in. I sat there with this weird smile plastered on my face, my stomach twisting into knots. My daughter, Emma, tried to hide her disappointment, but she's 7. Subtlety isn't exactly her strong suit. She looked at me with those big watery eyes like she was asking what she'd done wrong. My son, Max, just went quiet, his little hands still clutching the wrapped book we'd gotten for Grandpa. When we got up to leave, Dad chuckled like he'd just told a joke I'd missed. "You know times are hard, son," he said, patting me on the shoulder. "Next year will be better." I bit my tongue so hard I could taste blood. Because here's the thing, I know exactly how hard times are for them. Dad just got a bonus at work. Mom still posts pictures of her spa days every other week. And I'd just seen Ethan bragging on Facebook about the custom grill he installed on his new truck, the one Dad co-signed the loan for. I drove home that night in silence. My wife didn't even turn on the radio, just reached over and squeezed my hand once. The kids fell asleep in the back, their little heads leaning against each other. I felt something cold settle in my chest, heavier than anger. It was this hollow, numb feeling, like something inside me had finally clicked into place. That night, I stayed up late scrolling through old family photos, wondering when exactly I stopped being their priority. Was it when I chose a trade school instead of college like Ethan? Was it because I work as a mechanic instead of an engineer? Or maybe it's just because I don't make them look good at family parties. The next morning, I woke up to a string of texts in the family group chat. Pictures of Ethan's kids showing off their new gifts, Mom gushing over how blessed she felt, Dad making jokes about Santa's little helpers. No one mentioned my kids. Not one word. I stared at the screen for a long time, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could have let it go, but something inside me was done playing along. I wasn't going to just swallow this one like every other year. And that's when I got the idea, a little spark at first, but the longer I thought about it, the more it turned into a plan. The week after Christmas was always when we'd have the casual family brunch, which in my family means everyone gathers at Mom and Dad's house, complains about the weather, and pretends nothing awkward happened at Christmas. Normally I'd beg off, but my wife suggested we go. "Maybe it'll clear the air," she said gently, though the look in her eyes told me she didn't believe it either. So we went. I pulled up to my parents' driveway and noticed Ethan's brand new truck parked proudly out front, the one with the custom grille and rims that probably cost more than my car is worth. He was standing outside, holding a beer, like he was waiting to show it off. "Check it out, little bro," he said as soon as I stepped out of the car. He tapped the side mirror. "Dad helped me upgrade the suspension too. Rides like a dream. You should think about trading up." I nodded, tight-lipped, trying not to think about the fact that I'd been patching up my old hatchback just to keep it running. Inside, Mom was already setting the table, humming cheerfully, like she hadn't just told my kids Santa skipped them this year. During brunch, the conversation kept circling back to Ethan, his promotion, his truck, the private school he was thinking of enrolling his kids in. Mom was practically glowing, asking questions, bragging like she was the one who'd gotten promoted. When my wife mentioned very casually, that Max had gotten an award at school for perfect attendance. Mom smiled politely and then immediately pivoted back to Ethan's kids. That's nice, dear. Oh, Ethan, did you tell everyone about Sophie's piano recital? It was like my kids were invisible. I caught Emma tracing little circles on the tablecloth with her finger, her face blank. Then came the part that still makes my jaw clench when I think about it. Mom stood up halfway through dessert and clinked her glass for attention. Since we're all together, she said sweetly, we wanted to let everyone know we've decided to start a family fund. I frowned. Eh, what? Dad smiled like he was announcing a charity drive. A family fund. Everyone chips in a little each month so we can help each other out when times are tough. Emergencies, kids' birthdays, vacations, keep things fair. My stomach dropped. Fair. I repeated slowly. Yes, Mom said, looking right at me. We know you've been struggling a bit this year, Caleb, and we want to make sure we can all support each other. For a second, I almost felt touched, until Ethan spoke up. Yeah, and it'll help cover things like when the kids need new tablets for school or, when someone wants to throw a big birthday party. I blinked. Hold on. Are we talking about a slush fund for your kids' iPads? Mom's face went tight. Don't be dramatic. Everyone will benefit. Really? Because last week my kids didn't even get a pair of socks, but your grandkids got designer jackets. I wasn't yelling, but my voice was sharper than I intended. The room went quiet for a beat, then Dad chuckled like I'd told a joke. You know we had to cut back this year, son. Cut back on what? I shot back. Your vacation? Your truck upgrades. Ethan raised his hands, smirking. Hey, don't take it out on me just because I'm doing well. That was the moment I realized there wasn't going to be any clearing the air. They didn't see what they were doing. Or worse, they did, and they didn't care. I dropped it for the kids' sake. But when we got home, I sat in the garage for half an hour before going inside. My wife eventually came out and sat next to me on the cold step. You okay? She asked softly. No, I admitted. But I think I know what I need to do. Over the next few weeks, the group chat blew up with updates about Ethan's life. Pictures of the kids at ski lessons. Mom asking everyone to chip in for Sophie's dance recital costume. A reminder about the family fund with a suggested contribution amount that was laughably high considering our budget. I didn't respond at first, but one night Mom called me directly. Caleb, honey, did you see the message about the family fund? We really need to get this rolling. Your brother already contributed. Of course he did, I muttered. Mom sighed. We just want everyone to have equal opportunities. You don't want your kids to feel left out, do you? I actually laughed at that. A short, humorless sound. They already are left out, Mom. You made sure of that at Christmas. She was quiet for a moment. Don't be cruel, Caleb. You know we love your kids. We're just trying to. To what? Keep Ethan on a pedestal? Make sure he never has to pay for anything by himself. Her voice turned sharp. Watch your tone. We're doing what's best for the family. I hung up before I said something I'd regret. But my hands were shaking, and I realized this wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was manipulation. They weren't just ignoring my kids. They were trying to make me bankroll Ethan's life. A few days later, Dad sent me a message that made my blood boil. Hey son, just a reminder about the fund. We figured since Ethan's kids have some big expenses coming up, you could double your first month's contribution. You don't want them to miss out, right? I stared at the screen, feeling that cold, hollow click again, like the night of Christmas. No, I wasn't going to be guilt-tripped into paying for their kids' iPads while mine were being ignored. And that's when the idea that had been smoldering in the back of my mind flared up again. Bigger, sharper, more focused this time. I didn't just want to opt out. I wanted them to feel what we felt. A few weeks later, I got a text from Mom that simply said, "Family dinner. This Saturday. Everyone's coming." No explanation, no context, just an expectation. I almost didn't go. Part of me wanted to stay home, order takeout, and watch a movie with the kids. But my wife convinced me. If you skip, they'll just say you're being dramatic. So we went. When we got there, the house was buzzing. The table was set like a holiday feast, way fancier than usual. Candles, real china, the works. I was confused until I walked into the living room and saw a massive stack of wrapped boxes against the wall. What's all this? I asked slowly. Mom beamed. Oh, we wanted to do a little something special for the grandkids. Make up for Christmas. I felt a cautious spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had actually listened. Maybe this was their way of apologizing for leaving my kids out. Then I saw Ethan's kids come barreling into the room, screaming with excitement. Is it time? Can we open them now? Mom clapped her hands. Go ahead. Paper flew everywhere. Shiny new headphones. Name brand clothes. A freaking Nintendo Switch. I glanced at my kids. Emma's face lit up for a split second, like she thought this was for them too. She sat on her knees, waiting, patient. Then I realized there were no presents for my kids. Not a single box with their name on it. Where are? I started, my voice tight. Mom must have read my mind. She smiled sympathetically. Oh, sweetheart, we figured we'd wait to get something for your two until the family fund is set up. We don't want them to feel shortchanged if we can't match what Ethan's kids get. I just stared at her. So you gave Ethan's kids everything now, and mine get to wait? Dad chimed in like this was some perfectly reasonable solution. Exactly. That way we can make sure it's all fair. I laughed. I couldn't help it. This bitter, disbelieving laugh that made everyone turn to look at me. Fair? You call this fair? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Come on, Caleb. They're just gifts. Don't make it a big deal. But it was a big deal. Emma's face crumpled. She didn't cry, not in front of everyone, but I saw her little shoulders slump as she slipped off the couch and went to sit by the window. Max sat there stone-faced, gripping the edge of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. My wife caught my eye, her jaw set, but she didn't say anything. She knew this was my moment. I stood up slowly. We're leaving. Mom blinked. Don't be ridiculous. Dinner's almost ready. No, I said louder this time. We're leaving. Right now. I gathered the kids, ignoring Ethan's little chuckle behind me, and walked them out to the car. My wife followed silently. The entire drive home, nobody spoke. It wasn't until we got back to the house and the kids were in bed that I finally let the anger boil over. I'm done, I said, pacing the kitchen. I am so completely done with this. They didn't just forget this time, they planned it. They invited us over to watch our kids sit empty-handed while Ethan's got everything. My wife nodded grimly. I know, and they expected you to smile through it. I sat down hard at the table, running a hand through my hair. I've been swallowing this for years. The little digs. The favoritism. The way they treat Ethan like he can do no wrong. But tonight, I broke off, shaking my head. Tonight was different. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. Then stop letting them do it. Stop showing up for them when they won't show up for you. Her words stuck with me. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Mom, 1 from Dad, and a cheerful text from Ethan. Sorry if we made things awkward last night. Mom said you overreacted, but don't take it personally. The kids were thrilled. I stared at the message until my phone dimmed and locked. And then came the final straw. 2 days later, while I was at work, my phone buzzed with a notification from the family group chat. It was a picture of a giant backyard party, balloons, banners, catering trays lined up on a table. Mom had captioned it, "Surprise party for Sophie." Couldn't wait. She deserves this. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Sophie's party. The one they'd been talking about for weeks. The one they asked me to contribute to through the family fund. I hadn't sent them a dime, and they went ahead and threw the party anyway. And they hadn't even told us about it. I scrolled through the photos, my chest tightening. There were pictures of Ethan's kids opening more gifts, Mom and Dad grinning, relatives I hadn't seen in months laughing in the background. There wasn't a single empty chair at that party, except for the ones where my family should have been sitting. That night, Emma climbed into my lap and asked, "Daddy, why don't we go to the fun parties anymore?" I didn't have an answer for her. Something inside me hardened. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was exclusion. Deliberate. Calculated. And I realized something. They weren't going to change. Not on their own. If I wanted my kids to stop being hurt, if I wanted to stop feeling like the forgotten son, I was going to have to do something drastic. Something they wouldn't be able to ignore. And that's when the plan really started to take shape. The week after Sophie's party, the house felt heavier. It wasn't just me. The kids were quieter too. Emma stopped asking when we'd see Grandma and Grandpa again. Max kept to himself, reading in his room, barely coming out except for meals. My wife and I exchanged these loaded looks, the kind where no words are needed because we both knew something had shifted permanently. I went through the motions at work, but even my coworkers noticed something was off. "You good, man?" my buddy Drew asked as we were closing up the shop one night. I shrugged, muttered something about family stuff, and left before he could press further. The worst part was the group chat. Every day, without fail, a new message popped up. Photos from Ethan's housewarming. Clips of the kids playing with their new Switch. Mom asking everyone for input on the family vacation they were planning for spring. A vacation I clearly wasn't invited to. At least, not yet. Finally, I muted the chat. I didn't leave, not yet, but I couldn't stomach another cheery update while my kids sat at home wondering why they weren't included. One night, I sat in the garage again, staring at the tools hanging on the wall, the faint smell of oil and grease grounding me. My wife came out and leaned against the doorframe. "You can't keep doing this to yourself," she said softly. "I know." My voice sounded flat. "But if I stop showing up completely, it's just going to give them more ammo. See? Caleb's being difficult again. Caleb doesn't want to be part of the family." She walked over, sat next to me, and put a hand on my knee. "You don't owe them your peace of mind just to avoid their gossip." Her words hit me like a hammer. I realized I had been performing, showing up to family events, smiling through gritted teeth, pretending everything was fine, just so I wouldn't be labeled the problem. And for what? It didn't stop them from excluding my kids. It didn't stop them from asking for money. It didn't stop them from throwing a party behind our backs and posting about it like it was some big win. Something had to change. So I started small. I stopped volunteering to host. I stopped rearranging my work schedule to make their events. I started putting my kids' activities first, even if it meant missing a Sunday dinner. At first, Mom noticed. She called me one evening, her voice sharp. "Caleb, we didn't see you at brunch today. Is everything okay?" "Yeah," I said evenly. "Max had a science fair project due. We stayed home to finish it." She'd scared. "Well, you could have come after." "We didn't want to," I said, cutting her off. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a chilly, "I see." After that, I heard from her less and less. But pulling away didn't magically make the hurt go away. If anything, it made it worse, because now I had space to actually feel it. One night after the kids were asleep, I sat at the kitchen table scrolling through old photos on my phone. There was one from 3 years ago, my dad holding Max at his 5th birthday party, both of them grinning, frosting smeared on Max's cheeks. Back then, we were all still close. Back then, I still believed that my parents loved my kids the same as Ethan's. I put the phone down and just sat there, staring at nothing. I realized I was mourning something that wasn't dead, not yet, but maybe it needed to be. That was the lowest point. The breaking point came a week later. It was a rainy Saturday morning when Dad called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hey, son," he said casually, like nothing had happened. "Listen, Ethan's truck payment came due a little earlier than he expected this month. We were thinking this would be a good chance for the family fund to kick in." I went very still. "There is no family fund, Dad. At least, not one I've agreed to." He sighed like I was being difficult. "Caleb, don't make this harder than it needs to be. It's just one payment. You can afford it." I actually laughed. "You're asking me, the guy whose kids got nothing for Christmas, to pay for Ethan's truck? You know he's got a lot on his plate right now," Dad said irritably. "He can't do it all himself." My hand tightened on the phone. "Neither can I. But you don't seem to care about that." "Watch your tone," he snapped. I hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there in silence for a long time after that call, my heart pounding. That was when something inside me clicked for the last time. This wasn't about peace anymore. This wasn't about trying to keep the family together. This was about respect, and I wasn't going to get any until I stopped asking for it and started taking it. That night, while the kids were watching a movie, I opened my laptop and started going through my files, bank statements, tax returns, property records. I wasn't sure exactly what I was looking for yet, but I knew I needed to get my ducks in a row. Because when I finally made my move, I wanted it to be impossible for them to ignore. Once I made the decision to stop begging for respect, it was like someone flipped a switch. I woke up the next morning with this strange clarity, like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying for years. The first thing I did was take a hard look at our finances. I stayed up late that night with my laptop, going through everything line by line. For the first time, I wasn't just trying to survive, I was thinking strategically. If my family was going to keep treating us like second-class citizens, then I was going to make sure we were strong enough to never need them again. I cut out anything that wasn't essential. Old subscriptions, impulse purchases, gone. I called up a buddy who'd been asking me to help him on the side with car restorations, and I said yes. Weekends that used to be spent at family events were now spent in the shop, hands deep in engine grease. But for the first time, I didn't mind. Every extra dollar we made went straight into savings. My wife noticed the change first. "You seem lighter," she said one night as we sat on the couch together. "I am," I admitted. "It's like I finally stopped playing their game." The side work started paying off faster than I expected. Within a few months, we'd saved enough to pay off the last bit of debt we'd been carrying since Emma was born. For the first time in years, we had breathing room. And that breathing room gave me ideas. One of the guys I worked with mentioned that a small commercial garage across town was looking for a new owner. It wasn't fancy, but it had good bones, 3 bays, a waiting area, and a loyal customer base. The owner was retiring and wanted to sell it cheap. At first, I hesitated. Buying a business felt huge, risky, but my wife was the one who pushed me. "You've been running half this shop for years," she said. "Why not run your own?" So we did. I scraped together every bit of savings we had, got a small loan, and signed the papers. Just like that, we were business owners. The first few months were hard. Long days, longer nights. But it was ours. I poured everything into that shop. New tools, fresh paint on the walls, a logo that Emma helped design. Max set up a little corner with free coffee and coloring books for customers' kids. Word spread quickly. People liked that we were local, family-run, and honest. Within 6 months, business was booming. I hired 2 extra guys to help with the workload and even managed to give myself a modest salary bump. And with every passing week, I felt myself standing a little taller. It wasn't just about the money, though that definitely helped. It was about control. For the first time, I wasn't dependent on anyone else's schedule, anyone else's approval. Meanwhile, my parents were still sending the occasional text about family updates, but I noticed the tone had shifted. There was less bragging, more fishing. "How's the shop doing?" Dad would ask. "Business good." I kept my answers short. "Good," I'd reply. Nothing more. The less I gave them, the more curious they seemed to get. Then came the moment that made me realize just how much things had changed. One Friday night, we were closing up the shop when a customer came in last minute with a car that needed urgent repairs. I stayed late to finish it myself, and when the man came back to pick it up, he handed me cash and said, "You just saved my weekend, man. Keep the change." It was a $100 tip. I drove home that night with grease still on my hands, grinning like an idiot. My wife met me at the door, and when I showed her the cash, she laughed and hugged me so hard I almost dropped it. It hit me then. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were winning. The kids noticed too. Emma started talking about saving up for a keyboard so she could take piano lessons. Max asked if we could build a treehouse in the backyard. Little things, but they felt like proof that we were finally moving forward. And every time I saw their smiles, I felt my resolve harden. Because while we were building something real, my parents and Ethan were still playing their game. They still sent out invites to events we'd love for you to attend, always with a price tag attached. Contribute to the fund, bring a dish, help clean up. I ignored most of them. Then one afternoon, Mom called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Caleb," she said, her tone overly bright. "We're planning a big family dinner next month. Your dad and I would really love for you to come. It's been too long." I said noncommittally. "And," she added, lowering her voice, "Ethan mentioned you've been doing well with the business. We're so proud of you." There it was. The fishing. "Thanks," I said evenly. "Well," she continued, "we were thinking it might be nice to do a little fundraiser for the family fund while everyone's together. You know, since things are going so well for you, maybe you could help set the tone with a generous contribution." I actually smiled. Because in that moment, I realized something. They still thought I was the same Caleb who would quietly open his wallet just to keep the peace. But I wasn't that guy anymore. I had leverage now. Money. Independence. A business that was growing every day. And a plan forming in the back of my mind. Sharper and more detailed with every interaction. If they wanted to put me on display at their little dinner, fine. I'd give them something to talk about. The call with Mom stuck in my head for days. Not because of what she said, but because of how she said it. Like she was inviting me to play a part in some family performance. I knew then that I wasn't just going to decline their generous contribution request. I was going to use that dinner as the stage for something bigger. So I started preparing. The first thing I did was sit down with my wife and tell her everything I was thinking. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of bills pushed to the side, the kids in bed upstairs. "I think they're expecting me to come to this dinner and hand them money," I said. She raised an eyebrow. And what are you going to do? I smiled. The first real, unforced smile I'd had in weeks. Not what they think. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Okay, tell me. So I did. I told her how I'd been keeping receipts, literal and metaphorical, of everything they'd done. How I'd saved screenshots of texts, copied messages from the family chat, even kept the voicemail from Dad asking me to cover Ethan's truck payment. She nodded slowly. And what are you going to do with all of it? I don't know yet, I admitted. But I know one thing. I'm not walking into that dinner as the same Caleb they think they can guilt into paying. I want them to see exactly what they've done, and I want them to feel it. From that night on, I got serious about gathering everything I might need. I went through years of messages, pulling out every example of favoritism, every don't tell Caleb slip up, every time they'd excluded my kids from something. I put them all in a folder on my laptop, organized by year. It was sobering, seeing it all laid out like that. This wasn't just a one-off bad Christmas or a single missed party. It was a pattern that stretched back years. The more I dug, the more I realized how deep it went. There was one message thread from 2 years ago where Mom and Dad had been planning a surprise vacation for Ethan's kids, and in the middle of it, Mom texted, "Don't invite Caleb's family this time. He'll just complain about the cost." I stared at that one for a long time, feeling my jaw tighten. They hadn't just accidentally left us out. They had deliberately chosen to. That was when my plan shifted from quiet distancing to something more deliberate. If they wanted to make this dinner into a stage, I was going to turn it into a stage too, but for the truth. At the same time, the shop kept growing. Word of mouth was spreading like wildfire, and one afternoon a customer came in who changed everything. His name was Mr. Lawson, an older guy with a classic car that needed serious work. We got to talking while I worked on it, and it turned out he owned 3 commercial properties around town, including the strip where my shop was located. "You're the new owner, aren't you?" he said with a smile. "Yeah," I said, wiping my hands. "Been here about 6 months." He nodded approvingly. "You're doing good work. You ever think about expanding?" I blinked. "Honestly, every day, but I figured that's a few years off." He chuckled. "Well, keep doing what you're doing. When the unit next to you opens up, I'll give you first crack at it. Better to have a good tenant expand than gamble on someone new." I thanked him, but inside I was buzzing. Expansion. More space. More bays. More income. And just like that, I had another card to play. Because if there was one thing I knew about my family, it was that they cared about appearances. And showing up to that dinner as the successful business owner who was already talking about expansion, that was going to hit differently. In the meantime, I made sure every part of my life was tight. Finances in order. Business records spotless. Personal savings at an all-time high. If they were going to try to paint me as the struggling son who needed their guidance, they weren't going to have a leg to stand on. Then, about a week before the dinner, I got a message from Ethan. "Hey man, just a heads up, Mom's planning to make a big announcement at the dinner. She wants everyone there. Don't bail this time." I stared at that message for a long time, my mind already racing. A big announcement. I had a sinking feeling I knew what it was. Probably something about the family fund, maybe even putting me on the spot in front of everyone. "Perfect." I replied with a simple, "We'll be there." But inside, something had settled into place. This was it. Everything I'd been feeling, all the frustration, all the anger, all the hurt, it was going to come to a head at that dinner. And for the first time, I wasn't dreading it. I was looking forward to it. I spent the next few days polishing up my evidence, printing out a few key messages, compiling screenshots into a neat little timeline. I didn't know exactly how I'd use them yet, but I knew I wanted to have them ready. I also made a few quiet calls, one to my accountant, one to a friend who did marketing work, and one to my buddy Drew from the shop. They didn't know all the details, but they knew enough to help me make sure everything about my business looked as professional as possible. By the time the night of the dinner rolled around, I felt something I hadn't felt in years walking into my parents' house. Confidence. No more quiet smiles. No more forced laughs. This time, I was going in on my terms. And when I saw Ethan's smug grin from across the room and heard Mom call out, "There's my boy. We're so glad you made it," I just smiled back, because they had no idea what was coming. The night of the dinner, we got to my parents' house right on time, which was a first. Usually we'd be the ones rushing in last minute, apologizing, trying to squeeze in between conversations that had already started without us. Not tonight. Tonight, I walked in tall, holding the door open for my wife and kids. Emma clutched the drawing she'd made for Grandma. Max carried the loaf of fresh bread we'd brought from a local bakery. The first thing I noticed was how crowded the house was. Everyone was there: grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles. Ethan stood near the kitchen with a beer in hand, grinning like he'd been waiting for me. "Caleb," Mom said brightly, coming forward to hug me. "So glad you could make it. And you brought bread." "Perfect. Wouldn't miss it," I said, my voice calm and steady. Dinner was loud, as usual, but this time I didn't shrink into the background. I asked my cousins about their jobs, laughed at my uncle's jokes, even told a few of my own. For once, I felt in control. But the real moment came after dessert. Mom clinked her glass, standing at the head of the table. "Everyone, if I could have your attention," she said with a smile. "We wanted to share something exciting with you tonight." I felt every eye turn toward her, and I knew this was it. The moment she'd been building toward. "As you all know, we've been talking about setting up a family fund," she continued. "And we think now is the perfect time to make it official. It's a way for us to support each other, to make sure the kids never go without, and to keep this family strong for generations to come." There were murmurs of approval around the table. Ethan stood up beside her, clapping his hands together. "And we're asking everyone to contribute. Whatever you can, of course, but we thought it might be nice if Caleb could kick things off. Set the tone for the rest of us." All eyes turned to me. In the past, I would have felt my stomach drop. I would have fumbled for my wallet, thrown in more than we could afford, and sat there red-faced while everyone clapped politely. Not tonight. Tonight, I smiled. "I'd be happy to kick things off," I said, pulling out the folder I'd brought with me. I placed it on the table in front of me and opened it slowly, letting the room quiet down. "But before we do that, I think it's important that we're all on the same page about what family support really means." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" Mom asked, her smile faltering slightly. I took out the first page, a printout of the text from 2 years ago, the one where she told Dad not to invite us on the vacation because I'd complain about the cost. I read it out loud. The room went still. Then I took out another, the screenshot of the message asking me to double my family fund contribution because Ethan's kids had some big expenses coming up. And another, the photo of Sophie's surprise party that we hadn't been invited to. And another, Dad's voicemail asking me to cover Ethan's truck payment. Each one, I laid carefully on the table, my voice calm, and even as I explained exactly what it was and how it had made me and my kids feel. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just told the truth. By the time I was done, the table was silent. Ethan's smirk had vanished. Mom looked like she'd been slapped. Dad's jaw was tight, his face red. "So," I said finally, leaning back in my chair, "before we talk about contributions, I want to make sure everyone understands why we won't be participating." I let the words hang there. "We've been excluded from birthdays, vacations, even Christmas," I continued. "And every time, we smiled and said nothing, because we didn't want to rock the boat. But that stops tonight. I'm done teaching my kids that being quiet is the same as being respected." I saw my wife's hand slide into mine under the table, a small squeeze of solidarity. "You want to build a family fund?" I said, looking straight at my parents. "Great, but you're going to have to do it without us. We're not interested in paying for other people's parties while our kids sit at home wondering why they weren't invited." For a long moment, nobody said anything. Then Ethan scoffed. "Wow, Caleb, really dramatic. You could have just said no." I turned to look at him, still calm. "I did say no. Repeatedly. You just didn't like hearing it." His face went red, but before he could say anything else, I reached into my folder one last time and pulled out a single sheet of paper, the business card my accountant had made me, listing me as owner and operator of my shop, with a little note about our upcoming expansion. "I don't need your money," I said, placing it gently on the table. "I don't need your fund. I don't need anything from you except distance." And then I stood up. "We're leaving," I said quietly. I didn't slam the chair back. I didn't storm out. I just gathered my kids, who were watching wide-eyed but strangely calm, and walked them to the door. But before I left, I turned back one last time. "You wanted me to set the tone tonight," I said. "Consider it set." And with that, I walked out, leaving the table, the papers, and the stunned silence behind me. The drive home was silent at first, but not the heavy kind of silence we'd been carrying for months. This was lighter, almost peaceful. Emma broke it first. "Daddy, She asked softly from the back seat. Yeah, kiddo. She smiled a little. You didn't yell. I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Nope, I said. Didn't need to. Max nodded, solemn as always. You told the truth. That hit me harder than I expected. Because he was right. And that was exactly what I'd wanted them to see. When we got home, my phone was already buzzing. 10 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and more texts than I could count. I set it face down on the counter and left it there. The next morning, it started again. Mom called first. Caleb, she said the second I answered, her voice tight. I can't believe you embarrassed us like that last night. I didn't embarrass you, I said calmly. I just told the truth. You didn't have to do it in front of everyone, she snapped. Yes, I said quietly. I did. Because if I'd said it privately, you'd have brushed it off like you always do. This way, nobody gets to pretend it didn't happen. She was silent for a long moment. Then, softly, you made your father very upset. Good, I said. Maybe now he'll think twice before asking me to pay for Ethan's truck. She gasped, scandalized. You're being cruel. No, I said. I'm being clear. And then I hung up. Over the next few days, the fallout rippled through the family. One aunt texted me privately to say she'd been biting her tongue for years, that she'd seen how my parents treated us and felt guilty for not speaking up sooner. A cousin called and apologized for never inviting my kids to their pool parties, saying she'd just gone along with whatever grandma planned. Even my grandparents, who rarely got involved, sent a card in the mail that simply read, "We're proud of you for standing up for your family." But the loudest reaction, of course, came from Ethan. He called 3 nights after the dinner, his voice tight with anger. You think you're some kind of hero, he sneered. You just made everything worse. Mom hasn't stopped crying since Saturday. Maybe she should think about why she's crying, I said evenly. This family was fine until you decided to make it about you, he shot back. I almost laughed. Ethan, this family has always been about you. I just finally said it out loud. He started to say something else, but I cut him off. Don't call me again unless it's to apologize, I said, and hung up. For the first time in years, the house felt calm. And then something happened that I hadn't expected. A few weeks later, Mom and Dad showed up at the shop. I was in the middle of an oil change when I saw their car pull into the lot. My stomach knotted for a moment, but then I stood up, wiped my hands, and walked out to meet them. Caleb, Dad said gruffly. Dad, I said, keeping my voice even. There was a long pause before Mom finally spoke. We didn't realize how bad it had gotten, she said softly. We thought you were okay with it. That you didn't mind. I raised an eyebrow. Didn't mind my kids being excluded? Didn't mind being asked to pay for things I wasn't even invited to? She flinched. No, I guess we didn't think about it like that. For the first time, I didn't rush to make her feel better. I meant what I said. I told them. I'm done pretending. I'm done letting my kids grow up thinking it's normal to be treated like they don't matter. If you want to be part of their lives, you can, but it has to be on equal terms. No more secret parties. No more special treatment for Ethan's kids. No more guilt trips. Dad shifted uncomfortably. And if we can't promise that, I shrugged, then you won't see us. It's that simple. We stood there for a long moment, the air heavy between us. Finally, Mom nodded slowly. We'll try, she said. It wasn't an apology, not really. But it was a start. They left a few minutes later, and I went back to work, my hands steady. That weekend, for the first time in months, my phone buzzed with a message in the family group chat from Mom. Dinner at our place Sunday, it read. Everyone invited. And this time, when we showed up, there were 4 gift bags by the door, 2 with Ethan's kids' names on them, and 2 with mine. Emma's face lit up when she saw hers, and I felt something in my chest unclench. It wasn't perfect. It might never be perfect, but it was different. And as I sat at the table that night, watching my kids laugh and eat and actually be included, I realized that this was the real revenge, not the silence I'd left them with, not the papers I'd put on the table, but the fact that they were finally treating my kids like they mattered. As we drove home, Emma leaned forward from the back seat and said, Daddy? Yeah, kiddo. She smiled. That was fun. And for the first time in a long time, I smiled back and meant it. Yeah, I said. It was. And just like that, I knew the game had changed for good.